Hello world of YouTube, and welcome to the next Reformatted Discography review, where I am going to be looking back at all the old discography reviews I've done and putting them in the new format where I rank their discography, give each album playful little joke awards to help give you guys a roadmap to a particular artist. And today, the topic of dissection is Detroit's own Eminem, Slim Shady, Marshall Mathers, an artist that I've talked about a decent amount on the internet. As somebody who heavily covers hip-hop on his channel, it's kind of hard not to talk about Eminem, whether it be artists that were influenced by him or the impact he's had on hip-hop. It's kind of hard to not look at that. And today, I'm going to be talking about his 11 records. Yes, even that one. And without further ado, let's get it started.
Everybody likes me, everybody hates me, they want me to go eat some worms.
This is the only record of his I haven't covered in any capacity on the channel, because I even did a review of the Marshall Mathers LP2. I covered Kamikaze on the listening log updates, but Revival has shown up on lists. I've talked about it in bursts, but I've never really sat down and talked about it in a more contextualized to his discography or by itself as a part of a bigger thing. And, I mean, there's a reason why it's on the bottom. There's a reason why it was on my worst of the decade list. This album sucks hot balls. Even Eminem stans do not endorse this project. There are two records of his that sit on the bottom of most people's lists, and yeah, those two are on the bottom of mine. Revival sits on the bottom, if only because even the songs with promise or with good things in them are ruined by Eminem himself. Or there's just so many tonal shifts on this project that just don't meld together in any good capacity. You know, to have this project start on this ballad of Walk on Water that tries to downplay Eminem's greatness before he's just like, nah, I'm great because I wrote Stan. It's a mess. That transition alone epitomizes the disjointed nature of Revival. But not only do you have the tracks where he's just trying to go too hard, too corny hard, like Believe or Heat or Offended. He balances that with songs that feel like the third act of the Relapse, Recovery, Revival trilogy that he seemingly has been pulling together with the pop-centric tracks of River or Walk on Water or Bad Husband or Like Home. That doesn't mesh. The production on a handful of these tracks is so fucking awful. Why did Remind Me need a bad sample of Joan Jett? I know that he did the samples on the Marshall Mathers LP2 with Rick Rubin, but it sounded so much better on here. The sample work on here is fucking awful. I like the idea of making a track like Bad Husband to apologize to Kim for all of the earlier work. Again, he did it on the Marshall Mathers LP2. This feels like he's trying to both top that record and create a trilogy end piece to the Relapse Recovery trilogy, but it just, those two things don't go well, because one leaves you reflecting on your, like, one of your most popular records and adapting it and morphing it into something else, and the other is you really coming to terms with your addictions and in a completely different way, while also writing these super poppy records, and they don't work. It's a bad meshing of the worlds. And like I said, even when there's a good idea or a good beat, M finds a way to fuck it up. There's not really a lot holistically you could pull from this. This, and the reason why it's on the bottom is because this is the one Eminem record where I can't tell you to even cherry pick really anything. Because the pop songs, I've never really liked M doing this whole super pop-centric tip, and it's at its worst here. And again, the good ideas are just ruined, whether it's a bad beat choice or more often than not, Eminem himself. So yeah, just avoid like the plague. You don't need to get here. Even if he made a record that is a response to the reception of this record, you don't need to listen to it. You can just listen to the response. Even if I don't love it, it's better than this.
Yo, man, you're just jealous.
Eminem ruined his career once. It was called ENCORE. And what's funny is the history behind this record, because this record has some notoriously abhorrent material. Like the sleepy flow on Evil Deeds, Puke, Big Weenie, Just Lose It, Rain Man. All songs that are some of the worst of M's career. And the story behind it, because even M does not endorse this record. As time has gone on, he's like, yeah, that was me at peak drug usage. It was also M trying to backpedal because the album leaked around the time it was supposed to come out. And so in response to that, he went in the studio and pulled together a bunch of shitty cuts to fill in the record before it dropped. And that led to a lot of bad things on ENCORE. There is at least one. There's 1.5, but one truly amazing song on here still. And that's Like Toy Soldiers. I was re-listening to that because I was re-listening to this project to do this review. And yeah, that song still just sticks out like a sore thumb. I love the beat. I love the sample on the beat. I love the subject matter. I love how Eminem handles the subject matter with brutal honesty. And I love just how that whole song comes together. You know, time hasn't been good to the Haley songs, and Mockingbird is probably the worst Haley song. He ruins Never Enough, even though it's a track with 50 and Nate Dogg, and they do their best here to make something salvageable. I like the beat. I like them on it, but M, you can take him or leave him. Take him or leave him. I even like Mosh. Like, Mosh is a politically charged song that I feel like is Eminem in his, like, political prime. You know, he was doing that on White America. I think he kind of pulls it together again on Mosh. But outside of those two, like, gleaming instances of pretty decent, like, representation of the golden era M, the rest of this record you really don't need, because he's doing the shitty singing like on Crazy in Love. He's doing the bizarre just career suicide that are all the tracks I mentioned, and tracks like Ass Like That, where he's planting seeds and doing more like statutory shit like he was doing on Just Lose It. Like there's a lot of messy shit on this record subject wise as well that does not paint M in the best light. And I feel like this was the first thing that M ever came out with that was truly bad, and it's my example of like, hey, it's projects like this that hold him from being one of the greatest to ever do it. Excuses of it fearing it leaking or not, this is unacceptable, dude. Cherry pick the good songs, but again, you don't really need the whole project.
But if the only reason I blowed is cause I'm white, though why don't every other white rapper?
I know that there's people that like Kamikaze, and that's fine. I personally just don't jive with the majority of this project. I agree that his flow is tight on a lot of it, and the instrumentals are a step above Revival. And, you know, the chemistry he has with Royce on Not Alike, and the fact that he, like, borrows that same trap flow that's popular and makes it his own is pretty neat. And I don't mind the comment, like, I don't mind him setting himself apart from that, like, the typical scene on that track, or, you know, him boasting about himself on The Greatest, but I think a lot of the subject matter on here is really whiny and just feels like it didn't come from the same guy who, like, wrote the shit that came out on the Marshall Mathers LP. Like, yeah, he's been attacking his critics since the beginning on tracks like The Way I Am and Criminal, and almost sort of in a sarcastic way on Role Model, but it just was handled so much better on those projects. It didn't come off as much as whiny as it does on here. You know, he sounds like an old man yelling at the cloud on this project, and it's sad. You know, because like I said, M does have some classic tracks, and his flow on here is pretty good at points, and he has this, and a lot of the beats he works with on here, while I still don't think they're the best he's ever spat on, are still really good on a handful of cuts on here, but I can't get past the subject matter, man. Like, Fall is another track that I just really don't like from him. And while he has the self-awareness to make the Paul skit be around the concept of this record, I think it's telling that on his following record, he made statements recanting statements that he made on this record. I feel like Eminem's now on this slippery slope where each project's now going to have a song talking about something he felt on the last project that may be different now because he's gained a new perspective, and I just want Em to grow, man. And the Venom song, I hate the Venom song. It's so fucking bad. And tracks like Normal and like Nice Guy just are a bad pairing with him complaining that, why doesn't anybody like me anymore? Like, it just paints Eminem in this sad light that I feel like he never painted himself in before. And it just feels like this bitter-ass release that I don't like to sit through. Even the tracks that I think are alright, I don't want to sit through this project because it's just wallowed in its own disappointment with the world because they're not going to sniff your asshole and think that it smells like fucking roses. If you like Eminem when he's angry, if you like angry Eminem from like the Eminem Show, or if you don't see the same like whininess that I do from the same sort of critic call-out tracks from the Marshall Mathers LP, you'll probably like Kamikaze. Again, there's tracks on here that even I like as a moderate Eminem fan, but as a whole, this project it doesn't do anything for me, man. I feel like it's sort of for those who really want more Eminem, just firing chopper flows throughout an entire project.
Similar to an actual arachnid or vaginal tarantula or black widow in fact.
You know, just because it's immediately next in the list does not mean that it sits immediately above Kamikaze. I do feel like his latest, even though I was a bit harsh on it in my review, is still a small step, like a decent step above Kamikaze in my opinion. You know, I do think still it's a little bloated. I liked how much tighter Kamikaze is over it, but I think that he's bringing a level of heat that I feel like works better for him than the bitterness that coated Kamikaze. I think the beats on here are also a little bit better as well, like on the Busta Rhymes sampled Ya Ya, which is an incredible posse cut, or the track with Anderson .Paak having some really good construction in its beat, or Godzilla with its sort of bleep, you know, it's sort of bleep bloop inspired beat as well. And I feel like he's just presenting a better project across the board. You know, I still think there's weak points. I still think Stepdad is really fucking weak. I think Into Deep sort of exploring of adultery just doesn't do anything for me. And I feel like the Ed Sheeran track still is weak, but I do like that he's working with Royce da 5'9" again a lot more prominently on You Gon' Learn and the aforementioned Ya Ya and I Will, which has a nice little Slaughterhouse reunion. I feel like those tracks have a lot of heat. I love that Ya Ya has Black Thought and Q-Tip on a track together because I love those two rappers a lot. I like the intro as well, Premonition. I think it sets the record up for a good amount of heat. Again, the project just doesn't sell on the motifs it's initially delivering with this Music to Be Murdered By. You know, it just doesn't deliver that outside of the darker aspects explored on Darkness that, like I said, I don't really think lend themselves to horrorcore, even if they do explore the darkness within man. And I really don't like the beat on Darkness either. I hate the Simon and Garfunkel sample. It's a mixed project. It's a project that is a mixed bag, which is why I gave it a 5. M still is corny as fuck on a lot of this, but he seemingly pulls it back in some doses on here. I feel like if you enjoy the Bad Meets Evil project, you'll like this one, because it has him bringing similar types of heat. Or if you want a record that I do think is similar to Kamikaze, just less fucking angry, like bitterly angry, listen to Music to Be Murdered By. I think it's a better project as a whole. It's just a little long. He's getting outside of the Marshall Mathers LP too, because I do like that a sizable amount more than this. He's getting there, and I feel like this is a good step back to decency, in my opinion.
The pressure motivates to know I hold the weight of boulders on my shoulder blades.
So Eminem's debut, his actual debut, Infinite, is a vastly different project than the Eminem that we actually ended up with. This record is a lot more sort of internally conscious, with a lot more laid back, almost like lo-fi, jazzy inspired beats. It's very influenced by old school 90s hip hop, like Tribe era, West Coast stuff like Del, the Funky Homo Sapien, and like the LL Cool J influence that he really is into is showed up a lot more on this project than anything else he's done since. He's not angry. He's not trying to stab people. He's honestly very hopeful on this project. On the track Infinite, he's seemingly super optimistic for the future. He talks about Haley. He calls Kim his wife. Like, it's almost like that. It's almost like the Frank Grimes of hip hop records, because he's just a bright-eyed, well put together gentleman that just gets shat on by the world, and you see him go to his darkest places after this point. Because not only does he have that optimism on the opening track, he has a track called It's Okay, which has a playful little hook. On 313 and Open Mic, he seemingly just has a lot of jovial playfulness to his bars, and he talks about being from Detroit. The rhyme scheme is not what you would expect from Eminem, and listening to this project, you would not expect Eminem to turn into the guy that he becomes one record later, but it is an interesting experience. I don't really think it fits if you're wanting to get into Eminem to visit this project. This is purely for those that are curious, but the reason why it's above all of the records I put it above is because the production's fine. Eminem's fine on it. His flow is different than you would expect from him, but it's pretty smooth. He fits like cream over a lot of these instrumentals, and with the artists that he works with, they fit really well with that laid-back, chill aesthetic that he's going for. It's not an angry Eminem because he doesn't have anything to be pissed off about yet. And I feel like this is purely for morbid curiosity, for sure. None of his records branch to this, but I feel like if you are an Eminem fan and you haven't listened to Infinite, you should give it a listen. It's on SoundCloud. I'll link it in the description. Give it a spin. If you are an Eminem fan, or if you are a stan of a lot of his well-revered material, and you've yet to check out Infinite, it's an interesting insight to where he was at before he was discovered by Dre and before his life really started to fall apart. And I appreciate it for that. I think that it's a decent enough 90s hip-hop record, and that's why it's in the middle of the list, because I don't think it's great, but I don't think it's shit either.
It's like an explosion every time I hold you. Wasn't joking when I told you you take my
Now, I don't know how much of a take this is that I put it below Relapse, but I think that this record at least excels in delivering a pop-centric Eminem in a way that none of his material post this could capture in the same vein, especially Revival. I think that the singing on here is the worst out of any Eminem project, like the opening of Cold Wind Blows or Not Afraid. There's a reason why there's a lot of pop singers on here too, because he could not excel in his hooks like, these pop singers could. And it's not that Eminem wasn't, not known for singing in his hooks. He sang on all of his records before this, but he wanted to ham it up so much on here. And I think that it doesn't work in those instances. But the pop hooks that are here, outside of maybe Won't Back Down, because I'm not a Pink fan, but the hooks where either someone is singing it like Rihanna, or the sample is singing it like Spacebound, or the really not super belty singing, but the hook on Cinderella Man is also incredible. It's a nice pop rap record. It's just, again, it's not a suit I don't think Eminem wears all that well. His flow on a handful of tracks on here, though, really good. I think him and Lil Wayne have chemistry on No Love. I like the untitled hidden track. I like that he has this rap song that's in a 3/4. It has this really cool sort of waltz to it that I think is good. I like his flow on Spacebound as well, and I like the story told on Love the Way You Lie, even if some of the lyrics are kind of cringy. This is like when he's really reaching that dad levels of cringe. But this record is salvageable. I could see the audience for this. If you enjoy pop rap, if you enjoy catchy hip hop, and you want to hear a guy who's regarded as one of the best to ever do the genre right, do it. You could do worse both by this artist and from artists not known for pop rap doing pop stuff. The beats aren't as good as the other beats on the other projects. That's the reason why it's below Relapse. Talk all the shit you want on that record. The beats, and it's because it's Dre, are a lot better than a handful of the beats on here. Some of the beats, really good, but they're just not Dre beats. And I mean, I'm gonna be honest, Dre and M just have this chemistry together, and Dre makes really good beats for Eminem, and I can't deny that. I'd be just spitting like lies if I said that. And yeah, that's the biggest reason why it's below Relapse. I think the record's fine. It's cheesy as fuck, but it's fine. If you like pop rap, it's okay. I feel like this is a good gateway into Eminem, honestly, if you like pop rap, because you're not gonna maybe enjoy some of the brutal harshness that comes from his more revered material, and you'll enjoy some of the stuff that comes after this, because his hook-centric stuff is just a lot more prominent post-Recovery. So if you like pop rap, maybe start with Recovery and work around the discography at your leisure.
The ghost of Mozart, even though they all say that they're real, I know that
Like I said, the biggest reason why this sits above Recovery is the beats. Dre and M just have this chemistry together that excels like on Old Time's Sake, or Deja Vu, or the guitar on tracks like Hello, or Insane is classic M, or 3 AM beat-wise is classic M. Sure, the accent on tracks like 3 AM and Hello and Same Song and Dance and Bagpipes from Baghdad I can see being obnoxious to some people. It's not super obnoxious to me just because M always raps with a bunch of different voices anyway. A lot of the material that's here, I just feel like when it's not being super cheesy in like a try-hard graphic sort of way, like 3 AM, he settles into some good atmospheres on this project, and I like the closer as well. It kind of leads into Recovery really well, and honestly, the recording sessions from this have a lot to pull from. This is the most redactable Eminem record, in my opinion. You could pull from a lot of the B-sides on here and put them into this and make a better experience, but as far as Eminem coming back into the fray, it has all of the characteristics of like the Marshall Mathers LP and the Slim Shady LP, with the graphic, super gruesome stuff like 3 AM and Same Song and Dance. It has the super radio-friendly singles like We Made You and Crack a Bottle. Those may be the weakest points of the record, but they balance that with a good throwback to the Dre era with Old Time's Sake or Stay Wide Awake. There's enough good and bad here to kind of make this album break even. Similarly to Recovery, it's just, again, those beats make it a little bit better. If you like Eminem's early material and you can look past the accent, you might get some enjoyment from this record, but it's purely for those that like that early stuff and just want one last glimpse of very old school Eminem before he started to dip his toes into other producers and different writing styles and different subject matter in his writing.
just like I did with addiction, I'm about to like a magician.
Now, the biggest reason why this album sits above everything that's come before it, even though it has some moments that just are very indicative of where Eminem was at during this point in his career, with tracks like Legacy and Survival and The Monster being these very Recovery-esque pop-leaning tracks, or tracks like Stronger Than I Was or Asshole that don't really epitomize Eminem's excellence. In fact, I think Stronger Than I Was and so far might be some of the worst material Eminem's put to record on a project that like has some decent shit on it. What makes this record better is the reflections, the songs that look back on old Eminem and show growth as a person, as an artist, and act as a legitimate good sequel to ideas from the Marshall Mathers LP1, like Bad Guy and Evil Twin and Headlights being this apology to his mom. That alone makes it, that in Paris and pairing it with Rhyme or Reason, which is a song where he attacks his dad, a subject that is not prominent in a lot of Eminem material. It's stuff like that that makes this better. That in tandem with the great tracks like Love Game, which have him and Kendrick going just at their old lovers in a love game. Berserk having him tap into this Beastie Boys era production with that same kind of snotty delivery. Or, you know, Rap God being a good Chopper song. You know, even if it has some writing that isn't necessarily the best and is very indicative of old Eminem, there's more good. There's a lot. The good here outshines a decent amount of the bad. Not all of the bad. Some of the bad here is pretty bad. But it outshines a lot of it in a way that is a lot more so than the other projects that I've talked about so far that have had outright awful songs. You know, Relapse and Recovery sit in this gray area where everything kind of meets in the middle, but this is the point where it does counteract. The good counteracts the bad, in my opinion. You know, the production, it's a little inconsistent across the board because, again, he's not working with Dre, really, but what's here that is good is pretty damn solid, and I'd argue is definitely the best project he's put out since his prime golden age of his first 3 records, which obviously his first 3 are in my top 3, but I feel like if you like the Marshall Mathers LP1, you will get a lot of enjoyment out of this record if you wanted to see even just little things like the Criminal continuation in a skit. Just little things like that just are really nice to see in like a callback sort of way. But if you like the Marshall Mathers LP1, you'll probably like the Marshall Mathers LP2. It's not a good starting point, but it's a good next point to go to if you like that record. So I think the Eminem Show is the weakest out of the 3, if only because he's not as gnashingly angry as he was on the first 2, and he was starting to lean more towards those pop-centric hooks and anthemic ideas that coded all of his records post this point. This is his Americana, if you will. It's the point where he really tried to start making super singles with tracks like Clean Out My Closet's big-ass hook, Without Me's bigger hook than the real Slim Shady's, or the sampling of classic rock that he's done pretty much on every record since this point with Sing for the Moment. You know, even tracks like Superman that are a little more laid back have this sort of hookier moments to it. That's more of a track that is similar to the hooks on the first 2 records, but it still has glossier production that doesn't leave it stuck in the sort of murkiness that coded the first 2 projects. It's still really good. Like, it has its cringy moments for sure, like Haley singing on My Dad's Gone Crazy. It's a little much, and Square Dance kind of falls in a similar realm. But I mean, this track still has some of M's greatest cuts on it, like Till I Collapse, Say What You Say, When the Music Stops, the tracks where he's by himself, like Business, or like I said, the big single Cleaning Out My Closet. He does a lot of introspection, he does a lot of reflection in a good way. He has some good bars on this project, and it's Dre production, so it kicks a lot of ass. If you like his first 2 records, you'll probably like this, or if you want to bridge to his older material that isn't necessarily full of some rougher songs like the Marshall Mathers LP2, and you like Recovery, you might like the Eminem Show. Again, it goes a little hard at points that people may not enjoy, but it's still not as intense as his first 2 records and features ideas that are still implemented on that project. So it's worth a look into. I think it's better than Recovery, obviously, but it still has its poppier-centric moments that might get you more into Eminem's older stuff. Yeah, it's pretty good all around.
I'm cancerous, so when I dish, you wouldn't want to answer this if you responded back with a back.
And his debut, on the other hand, is the opposite side of that coin. He is raw. He is angry. He is so unapologetic on this project that it may turn some people off, but it also set a standard for him to follow throughout his career. This is like the ixnay on the ombre for his career. It showcases him and Dre's chemistry on Guilty Conscience. It has him even being reflective on his potential status he could have in the general populace with a track like Role Model or Just Don't Give a Fuck. It has him reflecting on his own misfortune like Brain Damage. It has its own story-driven tracks as well, like My Fault. It introduces Eminem, a lot of facets of Eminem's career, in a pretty solid manner. The production, obviously, also dope because, again, it's Dre. But I feel like this has him at his slickest as far as, like, his most sleek delivery-wise. It's his grimiest delivery. That two contradicting statements, but it has him at his grimiest, it has him at his rawest. If you're a fan of more hardcore edged hip-hop, this would be a better jumping on point, honestly, because it has some dark shit on here, like him and his daughter dumping the daughter's mother's corpse into a river because he killed him, and he's got 2 more in the trunk waiting for her to help him with. There's a lot of dark imagery and grimness in the lyrics. It just has this overall aggressive tone to it that is a little cartoonish because he's playing up a character, but it has a lot of dark underlying moments. You know, the whole comparisons to old school horrorcore are more cemented on this project than any other project of his. It's a classic to some people's eyes, and I can see why. I think another thing that holds back M Records outside of dated vernacular is the skit-heavy nature of his projects. That's why I've never really loved all of his projects as a whole. Skits can work in hip-hop, but in M, they just feel like a program. You know, there's always, at least in these first 3, there's always an intro, there's always a skit with Paul, and on this one there's other skits that just kind of draw out the album as a whole. And it sets it down for me. Again, it set up a lot of stuff for him. It even set up Bad Meets Evil eventually, because there's a track with Royce on here, and they both sound hungry as fuck, and I like that tune. But yeah, it's got its problems to me, but it's still a record that I hold to a higher regard than some others in its genre.
Bitch made me an angry blonde, so I made me a song, killed her and put hate.
And yeah, I mean, this opinion hasn't changed. I've revisited his records a lot recently in order, and especially like very recently to do this review, and this is just his most consistent project. You know, the skits are probably some of the worst because he spends time beefing with ICP, a beef that really just feels out of place, so far removed from it. A lot of the references and stuff, again, feel very dated, but outside of that, you can see why so many people pulled inspiration from this dude, from this project. You know, tracks like Kill You and Criminal and I'm Back and The Way I Am just have this unabashed care for the general populace in a very self-indulgent sort of way, but it works. He has this track where he's really reflecting on his current status with his family, like Kim and his verse on Remember Me. He gets really dark on this record too, on those tracks, and on Drug Ballad. You know, he has, and on Kill You, he has this just unfurthed intensity that's just harnessed from the debut. He's not as cartoonish on here as much as he is dark, and I appreciate that. And the collaborations that are on here, like Amityville with Bizarre, or the Posse Cut Bitch Please 2, which has him and Dre, and Snoop, and Exhibit, and Nate Dogg, all just having a good-ass time on a track. You know, I think Stan is still one of the better story-driven songs that I've heard a rapper pen. I like the story on Stan. I think it's poignant, you know, because it talks about fan culture and obsessive culture and being such a big figure, especially an immediate big figure in the public eye. Like, it's a good reflective piece, that I feel like is still like relevant in today's world. You know, I think this record has its problems. Again, vernacular, dated references, all that sort of stuff. But the production is still top notch. I actually like the grittier production on here than I do on the debut and on the sequel record, or on the third of this trilogy of personalities. I like his flow on here a lot more. He just gets really slippery all over these beats in a way that just feels so tight. Again, he works really well with collaborators that are here. Remember Me is so fucking dark and angry. It's such a great, sleek, dark fucking hip-hop song. I like the playful moments on here too, more than on the other projects. This is just peak Eminem to me. You know, it's the record that's always hit me the hardest. When I was younger and was a more disenfranchised, angry guy, I resonated more towards the angrier cuts. But as I've gotten older, I've really appreciated the more reflective cuts, like Marshall Mathers and, again, Stan, you know, that talk more about his place in pop culture. I appreciate those moments a lot. And I've never considered Eminem to be one of the greatest, but given the material on here and on the other two records that surround it, I can see why people would think he is. And I appreciate a lot of the stuff that's on this record particularly, and think that it is the peak of his presentation as who he is. You know, and I think it's fitting because it's the one about his true self. So it's him purging through his frustrations in the rawest way, in my opinion. You know, even if he gets rawer and angrier on the Slim Shady LP, he harnesses that in a really true way on the Marshall Mathers LP that I think is more resonant to those who listen to hip-hop. While I think Slim Shady is a good gateway for those who maybe not necessarily hardcore hip-hop, but like horrorcore and want more cartoonish violence, listen to that. But if you like hardcore hip-hop, then I would start here and weave around his discography at your leisure. All of you probably already have, though. Eminem's no underground dude. Everyone knows who he is. This was more just me trying to rank his discography. But if you wanted a gateway, there you go. You've got it as well. You've got a roadmap before you. Use it at your leisure. And that's going to conclude another Reformatted discography review. Did you like this one? If you did, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdery content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons if you would like to join their ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, and help drive the community. It's linked in the description. I'm going to get out of here. I've been Devour Rack. You guys have videos, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.